My inner child is feeling abandoned by my mom. She takes care of me well in daily life, but she never talks to me and cares about me, my thoughts and feelings. I think this is my need. How can I ask my mom to respond my need? I am a social worker working with children and their parents. I discovered that I always see the problems and limitations of parents instead of child. How can I try not to blame the parents in my heart? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And I can relate to what you're saying very much. The same is true for me, Jing. And my mother, I'm older. My mother passed away I think about 10 years ago now. But I'll confess with you that although my mum was very warm in many ways and very caring in many ways, she was utterly unable to listen to my feelings. She would give what she thought I needed, but she would not make a space to listen to how I felt. So I could not open up to her with my dilemmas, my problems, my anxieties, my confusions. She was not somebody that I could turn to. And there was nothing at all that I could do. I tried everything. I was utterly and perfectly and comprehensively powerless to change that, because I can't change another person. All that was left for me, and this is true for a lot of us, is to learn how to live with that reality. You know, I would guess, Ching, that you've said what you've needed to say to your mum, that, you know, mum, please listen to me. I don't need A, I need B. And I'm disappointed about A. You know, I'd like B. And you've tried. And our parents have their own issues. Our parents have had their own childhoods. And let me explain blame. Why do we feel so blaming towards our parents? And then, did you notice the conflict that's inside you? Because you're trying hard not to be blaming towards your mother. You wouldn't be trying so hard if it wasn't that you have blaming feelings towards your mum. And that's, we have that as a conflict. Now, blame is from the inner child. Then there's shame about blaming, right? People have told us you mustn't blame. So then we feel embarrassed. Oh my God, listen to my blaming voice. And you try to force yourself to grow up. I shall not be blaming. It's impossible to force the inner child to grow up. You cannot use force. It never works. It cannot work. It's utterly fruitless. Telling your inner child to grow up is exactly the same as trying to grow a tomato plant in your garden. And if the plant's not growing fast enough, you take it by the stem and you pull to see if you can make it longer. No plant, nothing in nature grows by pulling it to be longer or taller or bigger. Your inner child does not ask for your expectations. Your inner child and my inner child ask for understanding and empathy. When we give empathy exactly at the level where the inner child is, then growth happens. You cannot push for growth. Growth happens when you give the tomato plant the exact nutrient, the exact amount of water, not too much, not too little, the exact amount of sun, not too much, not too little, the exact nutrients in the soil, the exact combination of soil bacteria, all of those conditions. When you give that to the plant, growth happens. Growth is inevitable. Love the inner child where he and she is at. Listen to your inner child when your inner child says, I'm angry at my mum. You don't need to tell your mum that. But be a good parent to your inner child. Be understanding to your inner child of why he or she is angry. And then that's how the blame will transform into the next stage. Blame is typical. It's one of the first things that you will hear in the voice of your inner child. The first thing is blame. It's a developmental stage, in a sense. When a child is hurt, particularly little children, but also adolescents, the first thing that happens is a protest. And the child's protest is necessary. That's how the child makes themselves feel good when their environment is not optimal, when their environment is disappointing or does not meet the child at where he or she wants to be met. When mum doesn't listen, when dad doesn't come over, when mum is pushy and authoritarian, when father is punitive, etc. The child is hurt. The first thing the child will do, and you watch, this is true for all children, you and me, is to blame. And we say the world is bad. Mum is bad, dad is bad. That's a moment. If we have the freedom to do that somewhere safe, without insulting somebody directly, even to think the thoughts of blame and to feel okay about it. Notice what happens next. We start to feel okay about ourselves. Even though my mum is somebody that doesn't know how to listen to me, and that's very disappointing, but I'm okay. I'm the person that really deserves to be listened to. That's a healing moment. So it's important to understand blame in that context. Now, what am I going to do when my mum doesn't know how to listen to me? In fact, the truth is most grown-ups are not very good at listening. I've never been to anywhere in the world where good quality listening is like an intrinsic and common part of the culture. Every civilization that I've had anything to do with begins from the premise that the adult is always right, the child is wrong, the children needs to listen, the adult needs to speak and do as you're told. Civilizations have been obedience-based. So most of us did not get listened to very well. I mean, there's variation in that, of course. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm just talking about the mainstream of most civilizations. So what are we going to do when our mums couldn't listen to us or our dads? Sometimes we need to turn to someone else. Who is there to listen? And it's okay to be sad about that. I wish it was mum, but the reality is it's not her. Auntie, uncle, brother, sister, ally, friend, tribe, counselor. So I would encourage you to accept the pain and the disappointment and the feelings of blame, accept that in a dynamic way. You listen to your inner child. Listen deeply and listen empathically to your inner child. Your inner child screams sometimes. Be there for your inner child. And then and reach for friends. When mum doesn't listen, who else is there? You know, there's millions of good people to choose from. Find the ones that know how to connect with you. The more that we do that for ourselves, the more that we can accept the disappointments that the world brings. Because it's full of it, full of disappointment and pain. And that, in turn, makes us better able to hold our clients. Feed the self, and you can hold your clients better. Thank you.
Emily 就係話點先知一個人真係療癒咗過往嘅傷口，還是佢其實係未療癒，但係通過壓抑或者 frozen 令自己唔再有情緒被事件牽動出嚟。 第二個問題就係超紅嘅問題。Maybe that's related to what Emily just asked. Do you find some of the childhood wounding could be healed completely, that you are not influenced by them anymore? While some are really severe, that you could only live with that, and you can only increase the awareness of how they affect you and not to react in the here and now.
My personal belief, thank you for those questions. They are related, aren't they? My personal belief, and I want to stress this is a personal belief from my experience. I've been a therapist for about 30 years. And I would welcome you, anyone disagreeing with me. I'm not going to pretend that I have proof. I will just share with you what I have learned so far in my 30 years as a therapist. If one day that changes, I will change with it. I don't think complete healing is the object of the game. I've never really seen that happen. And furthermore, I just don't think that is what we should be looking for. That's not what is necessary. And initially, that sounds like a bad thing, doesn't it? I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I want to explain to you how I understand healing, what I understand healing, emotional, psychological healing to mean. This is so important because I have lost count of the number of times somebody has sat in front of me and begins to say, oh my God, I'm so disappointed with myself. I have this issue and I thought I'd resolved it 10 years ago. I went to a therapist, I did some workshops, I read a book, I did some practices, meditation, mindfulness. I resolved it, it was all done. And now I'm very, very mad at myself because 10 years later, it's back and those feelings are back. I thought it was over and what's wrong with me? Okay, I've heard people say that to me probably a million times. I think that's the norm. That's not the exception. That is the norm. That's how it goes. And here's the reason why. Body memory is body memory. When you are 115 years old, it will still be possible for something in your environment, an experience, a relationship, something that you witness happening around you, to act as a trigger, to push a button that brings up emotional memory from your past, all the way back from when you were 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 1, childbirth, third trimester in the womb. Emotional memory goes back all the way to the third trimester in the womb. A little bit, or sometimes more than a little bit, of all of those feelings can come back. All of those feelings. Joy, peace, love, ecstasy, triumph, anxiety, grief, fear, anger, all of it, all of the feelings can be something that reminds you, it can come back up. What's the object of healing, as I see it? To get better and better and better and better at knowing what to do, how to respond when old feelings come up for me. With every new life stage, you enter into a new universe with massive new challenges. When you're young, you feel so powerful and strong, and then you have children, and invariably you will be made to feel fragile and vulnerable and quite emotionally out of control, because the challenges of being a parent are bigger than you are. And we all crack a little bit. And then you gain some kind of mastery about that, and you start to feel really good about yourself. Next thing you know, old age starts to creep in. And you look in the mirror And the proof is there that one day you will die. And between now and death, your body loses some of its brilliance, its vitality. So that's very threatening. And okay, this is all part of the normal life trajectory. But it brings up big feelings. It's a trigger, these existential crises. So all of us, we have our buttons pushed by these big existential dramas of life. And sometimes you feel like a baby again. Sometimes you feel like an adolescent again for a moment or a long moment, sometimes for weeks. Healing does not mean that all of that stops. It never will. It never will. And the sooner we stop expecting that, the sooner we start to feel okay about ourselves instead of beating ourselves up that we didn't triumph over nature. Healing means that if you get to know your inner child, the beauty, the strength, and the woundedness of your inner child, and always ask not just what are you feeling, but what do you need? Remember that. It's not just what you're feeling, it's what do you need, inner child, when you feel this way. The inner child will tell you, and you will be triggered again tomorrow, next week, next month. And you will get better and better and better and better at parenting yourself, at bringing the nourishment to yourself, so that if triggering is like falling in the hole, you get better and better at knowing how to climb up out of the hole. And what happens is, as you get stronger, wiser, your heart grows. It takes a much bigger event, a much bigger challenge to trigger you in the same way. You will still be triggered, but it takes more to trigger you. And you respond sooner and you respond more effectively. You fall in the hole, you'll climb back out again. Then you'll fall in another hole. And then you will climb back out again better. Beautiful. Okay? I think that that's what healing means. How do we grow up? Because there isn't just the inner child. There's also the part of you that's the adult. There's also the part of you that is the wise old man and the wise old woman. We have all of these parts. The more that you feed your inner baby, inner child, inner adolescent, the bigger the part of you that's an adult who does not blame. That's the definition. The child blames, the adult doesn't blame. The adult takes ownership and takes responsibility and has agency. The adult asks for help when needed. That part of you, that functionality inside you gets larger the more that you say yes to the inner child. Okay? When the tomato plant says, I need water, give the water. That's when the tomato plant gets bigger. So this is a journey, and it's a beautiful, we're lucky to have this journey, I think, on this planet. So we don't get to this healing perfection, but the wonder is in getting to the next place. Getting to the next place. That's the magnificence of life. Thank you.
You mentioned something about interpersonal neuropsychology. And I'm very interested. How can we start to learn? Because it's so new to us, right? And you mentioned that whether you like it or you don't like it, it happens, right? But how can we start to learn to harness the benefits of co-regulation among us as caretakers, parents, or teachers, or a mixture of these individuals? What can you suggest us to start?
Well, of course, Terence, what's new in the understanding is the scientific explanation of something that many human beings have been aware of and very conscious of for a long time in so many cultures. You know, what's interesting to me is that if you look at the I guess the wisdom traditions from many cultures, they tend to say the same thing, that we are, yes, we are individuals. At the same time, yes, we're not. There is a oneness. We're so intricately interconnected that our individuality is a pole of existence, but it is absolutely not everything that we are. And we're so intertwined. Really, the only thing that's new is that, you know, with the new brain sciences, and with their new instruments that they're able to take images of the brain and read exactly what's going on in there, and we can understand brain chemistry so much better. And that's a hard, solid science. It's not a lot of conjecture in it. So as they unpack the reality of how we co-regulate, which is a great word that you use there, the way that we constantly co-regulating, I find that the scientific explanation wakes me up to the reality of this process, that my being does not end at my skin, that we are dialogue, and each person is like a nodal point in constant co-influence. With so many ways, the hormones, the pheromones that come from our bodies are impacting the mood state of the person that we're with. The way that we use our voice, the sing-song of our voice, changes the brain waves of the other person. We don't sing to each other, we are singing each other. There's beautiful science looking at the prosody. That prosody is the scientific name for the intonation of our voice, not just the content of what we say, but the rhythm and the intonation, the musicality of our voice. And we use that very intentionally, though usually subconsciously. The way that a lot of scientists looked at how mothers change their voice and the manner of speaking when they're speaking to their babies. And the eye contact, the way that our bodies move, how we use our voice will alter the brain chemistry of the baby. When we are doing this well at our best, we can cause our babies to be in a deep state of peace and pleasure, comfort and security through those interactions. Your question was more specific, though. You were asking, well, what kinds of things that we can do? Many. The first things, and do you know what, Terence? Please know that what I will suggest right now is only a very small, it's a very small part of the whole supermarket of things that you can do to become more consciously aware and more intentional about co-regulation. But listening to the sensations in our bodies, I think, is primal. It's of primal importance. Our bodies speak in a language that is universal. They don't speak in Mandarin. Our bodies don't speak in English. They don't speak in French or Spanish. Our bodies speak in sensation. Sensation, emotion. Sensation, feeling, and emotion. That's all a complexity of energies. And the body doesn't know how to lie. But you won't know. The body's saying all kinds of things you won't know until you bring your attention there, which often we don't. For most of us, our culture has trained us to enclose our attention between here and here. so that we become sharply aware of our slow thoughts, our frontal lobe thoughts. They're the slow thoughts. We think that that's our thinking. It's not. It's a little part of our thinking. We have much deeper thoughts that happens quickly. Our bodies tell us a lot more. Listening to the body, you start to learn to decipher that language. You know, when I talk to you, I feel a little tightness in my upper belly, my solar plexus, that lets me know that I'm feeling sad for you as you tell me your story. That kind of thing. That kind of thing. You will also notice as a counselor, therapist, helper, impulse in your body. Impulse to reach out, impulse to touch, impulse to hold. It's not always appropriate to hold our clients physically, but then that tells you you've started to care about your client. Intentional co-regulation begins to happen when you become aware of those impulses in your body and you give permission to that caring. Allow yourself to care. Holding can happen in so many ways. Just showing our clients that they have an impact on us. Yeah. That we are touched, that we are moved by their story. That's a kind of holding. I want to recommend the work of, there's an association of interpersonal neuropsychology centered in the university in San Francisco, the University of Berkeley. Google this. One of the directors of that body of research and science, his name is Dan Siegel, DANSIEGEL. Google Dan Siegel, Google interpersonal neuropsychology, and it's going to open a lot of doors and give you, you know, these people, these researchers have been quite good at, they don't do just the academic writing for peer-reviewed journals, which is very, very dense. They've been good at writing books so that the general public or general practitioners like us don't get a migraine headache every time we have to read it. You know, they've been good at making that science digestible by non-academic minds. There are many, many books available. So I've given you a couple of hints in that direction. You will find that, Terence, most interesting and I think uplifting too. And we're living, if I could just add, my belief is that we're living in a moment in history in which psychology, it's up for revision. It has to change. We thought that we're individuals and nothing else, only individuals, and that our families are mum and dad and a couple of kids. You know, when we draw a line around ourselves that way and cut and remove ourselves from the context, you lose the ability to understand the human being. Our influences are greater than mum and dad and family. And we are individuals, but we're also, there's an us. There's a depth to our consciousness, which is we, you know. I'm thinking right now, beautiful. That's beautifully expressed in Taoism. The Tao, there's a we, there's a, and that's no less important than in our individuality, individual self-expression. Okay, so psychology is starting to understand all of that and starting to encompass that the interpersonal nature of psychology happens between us, not just inside us. It's a between space. Thanks, Terence. Good question.